Real musicians do not fear AI. Here's why. AI. So that's been all the rage for a while now, for the last couple years especially. The fears of AI have really ramped up of late. I think everybody is aware of this now. This is not a new video in terms of talking about AI, but I think this might be a little bit different. I'm neither cheering AI on, nor am I encouraging fear of it. But I just want to talk frankly about it, about what it is, what it does, and what it, most importantly, it cannot do. So AI obviously means artificial intelligence. And if you take those two words, artificial and intelligence, and you start breaking those down, you can start with the word artificial. We could break it down even further to artifice. What is the origin of the word artifice? Well, it's two words actually, both coming from Latin, one of them being art, and I think that's fairly self-explanatory. The other being facere, which meant in Latin to make. You might say facilitate, some synonyms, facilitate, to fashion. All of these things come from sort of that root, to make. So what is it that AI seeks to make? Well, it seeks to make whatever we tell it to make. It doesn't just make things necessarily on its own, but it follows a mathematical design that was put there by human beings. And the artificial part of it, the artifice, is in being able to describe purely mathematically things that people want to see. You ask AI a question, hey, can you make this for me? AI might come back and do it for you. It might collate large amounts of information given a data set that you ask it to parse, and it might give you a bunch of bullet points and collate things really nicely and help you do whatever it is you're trying to do. Even if that is to make a song that no one's ever heard. You can tell AI, make a reggae song in the style of the Beach Boys, and that's possible. It can do that, and it can do it very rapidly, and it's doing it based on what it has learned or self-taught or been taught about these various forms of music. What constitutes a prototypical Beach Boys song? You can deconstruct it. What are the key signatures like? What are the tempos like? What is the drum sound like? What is the vocal sound like? It's got a lot of harmonies, the Beach Boys. We know this is sort of barbershop quartet-ish. You could break down all these different aspects of whatever music it is you're trying to analyze, and you can analyze it in a very logical, mathematical fashion, and that's what AI does. So there's a lot of artifice in AI, obviously, because that's part of the name, artificial intelligence. But is it art? What does it mean to create art? I think for something to be art, it has to have a soul. And that might sound like trying to define an undefined word with another undefined word. But I think if you're a human being, you know exactly what a soul is. And that's kind of inherent in the human condition, to know what the soul is, to be able to experience the soul without necessarily being able to describe it in words. And this is the problem with words. You can always break words down into earlier forms, smaller components, just like you would break down an atom into smaller components of, proton, neutron. You can always break down matter, just like you can break down words. And words themselves are a form of artifice. So really what AI is kind of doing is describing things mathematically, where we, in our language, human language, we tend to describe things with words. And the syntax of mathematics and language are very similar, and anybody who has studied one or both of these disciplines will tell you exactly that. That's why we can have mathematical word problems. Sid was traveling 45 miles per hour for this long. How long did it take him to go however many miles? These sorts of questions. They can be described accurately with mathematics also, but they can also be described with words, provided that you have definitions for all of those words, and everybody agrees upon and understands those definitions. But something as ethereal as the soul, I'm not sure you can really define in a meaningful way using words. I think it's something that you just have to experience and you understand and you know inherently, which is why humans will always be able to understand what a soul is, I think, where machines never will, because it's not something that you can communicate. And words are inherently inaccurate. Where we might think that mathematics is extremely accurate and has the ability to be extremely accurate, to the point where, some people even believe that given enough data, this may be true. Given enough data about the universe, it can be described in a purely mathematical way or be modeled in a computer somewhere in a purely mathematical fashion, the entire universe. So if you had data about every single atom in the entire known universe, that somehow you could recreate the universe, and would that be a living universe? And some people claim, well, yeah, that's the definition of what the universe is. If you're able to describe it, then you've captured it and you've recreated it in a sense. But no, I don't think so, because you would not have recreated a universe that was capable of self-sustaining or self-creating or evolving or any of the things that we associate with the universe in which we live. The uncertainty principle behind, quantum mechanics for, 100 years or more now, we've had this quantum mechanic puzzle of uncertainty that certain particles will change depending on whether or not we're observing them. And how does this particle know when we are observing it and when we're not observing it? How is that knowledge passed? With what mechanism, what pathology is there to allow particles that are completely separate from me and my intellect and my observance of reality? What's there between the two things? Is it a soul? Maybe. Is it God? Maybe. I contend probably. How else are you going to describe it? Something that is that fundamental to reality being that much of a mystery? Still, I don't think there's any other way to describe it except as a mystery. And this is why I don't think AI will ever rise to the level of anything humans could create, whether it's in art or whether it's in music, sculpture, whatever it is. Architecture is another good example. There are good questions here too about whether our creations are art or artifice, because I think we're capable of both. I think human beings are capable of real art, something that is true to ourselves and means something to us. But I think we're also capable of producing pure artifice. We're capable of writing a song that has no emotion whatsoever behind it, or painting a painting with zero emotion behind it, where it's just a facsimile of something, is an amalgamation of the things that we've learned or discovered or observed about other people's art, where they have been expressing something. And we can take aspects of that, and in a similar way to AI, we can create an artifice or an artificial representation of that same thing if we want. Is there a skill in being able to do that? Yes, I believe there is a skill in being able to do that. But is it art? Does it rise to the level of something that is as important as what we typically deem art to be? Can this artifice that we've created, can that be called art, even though it's so derivative of everything that's come before it as to be almost indistinguishable from all this other art? Can we still call that art when it's just a pale facsimile or an amalgamation of something else? It's, stolen in a large portion. I think in order to be art, it has to, first of all, it has to fundamentally express something that is, or attempt to express something that is unexpressible. There has to be something there that compels the artist. The artist creates art because he has to. AI creates it because it's told to. There's no compulsion within a computer where it has to get this thing out of itself, or else it feels like it will explode. Like art is supposed to make you feel, Art is supposed to be a cleansing. It's supposed to be a rite, R-I-T-E. And also an R-I-G-H-T, but an R-I-T-E also. It's a form of prayer. When done right, I believe it is a form of prayer. And is AI capable of prayer? No. I don't believe so. And why? Because it has no soul, because it's pure artifice, it's pure mathematics. It doesn't even see what the question you're asking. It only sees the ones and zeros, and it goes and finds other ones and zeros, and it knows absolutely nothing. There is no intelligence there. That's why it's called artificial intelligence. There is no understanding of what it's doing. It is just 1 + 1 = 1. It's basically a glorified calculator. So why should real musicians fear this thing if it's just a calculator? Did real mathematicians fear calculators when they first came out? I'd never heard of a mathematician fearing calculators. I heard of mathematicians excited because they could then use a calculator. Never We should be afraid of calculators because they're smarter than we are. At what? At adding up numbers or dividing numbers quickly? I mean, so? Sure, I mean, it might seem magical. I can tell AI, hey, make me a song in this fashion, and it could do it rapidly, and maybe make something convincing. But again, that's pure artifice. And if we were to think about it long enough, we could do the same thing, but there would be I contend there would be much more soul and meaning and purpose behind it than the crap that AI just spits out on a dime. I always compare music to, visual art and other forms of art as well, because I love all forms of art. Going back to the architectural thing, there are architectural styles like revival styles, Roman revival, Greek revival, Gothic revival. There are certain elements in Gothic revival style that kind of harken back to the Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe, cathedrals like Notre Dame. You see these flying buttresses along the outer walls, and you think, oh man, that's really beautiful. And then you'll see some Gothic revival structure or other that might incorporate elements of that style and might put buttresses or other ornamentations on the building that doesn't necessarily have to be there, but is there for ornamentation purposes. It is the textbook definition of artifice. It is a facade, a faceer. It is a mask. It's something that is put on the outside of something to mask what it truly is. If you look at the flying buttress, for instance, in Gothic architecture, it's there for a reason. It's there to keep the building upright. It's battling the forces of gravity that are constantly trying to push it back down. That's really a metaphor for all of human experience. The battle between the brutality of the jungle and civilization itself. This sort of precipice that mankind is always on and has always been on between nature and this civilization that we've created. And the civilization is in a lot of ways artifice. It is something that we have constructed that isn't real, that we try to sweep away all of the dirt in our homes. We try to clean up and we try to prune our gardens, and we take out undesirable plants and we put in the desirable plants. We pick and choose the things that we want to surround ourselves with. And that in itself is a form of artifice, but it's also a form of art. There is spirit in it. There's a reason we do it, because to sort of feng shui our environment is to surround ourselves with beauty. We want to surround ourselves with the beauty that we want to feel internally. And I think that's the function of art, to communicate this beauty, but from one person to another. And also not just that, but from one person and at one time to another person at a completely different time, maybe perhaps hundreds of years later. They will be able to look at our art that we leave behind today and say, I can identify with that. I get that. I feel the same way. Will they be able to do that with AI created stuff? Maybe in a purely logical sort of exercise. They might be able to look at it and appreciate it from one direction. But is it going to be art? Is it going to be one human speaking to another human through the ages? No, because it's purely artificial. And, going back to the architectural thing, you have all these artifice elements in revival styles that had to exist in the original. The flying buttress is holding up the walls. It's keeping gravity from pushing the building down to the ground, from collapsing everything that man has tried to build. But in the revival style, it's complete artifice. It's made to look like it needs that element to hold the building up when it really doesn't. Now, we're relying on reinforced steel, concrete to hold the building up. And we don't need flying buttresses, but they might put them on anyway because they look cool. So that's kind of the difference between art and artifice. And humans are also capable of that. We're capable of mimicry and artifice and lies. And there are people in every discipline who kind of rail against that lie. And I think those are really the true artists that push movements forward. In music, you can look at the Beatles, and what they did in the 60s with studio recording, and the way that they did what they did to popular music was a complete revolution. And no one, whether you like the Beatles or not, can deny that was a complete revolution in the way that things were done. Nirvana is a really good example, and they had a lot of help with the way that they were promoted. Also, they were promoted very heavily on MTV and by their record company, and All the trade publications, the Rolling Stones of the world applauded and loved them. So they helped them achieve that level of notoriety for this. But it's true that they kind of came along and smashed everything that was had been popular for the previous decade. That was necessary. It was a necessary cleansing of the palate, to have this kind of revolutionary change in the art form. One of my favorite bands of all time that I'm sure you've never heard of is called Thinking Fellers Union Local 282. And I listen to some of their music, and it's like noise, a lot of it, but it's also like jazz. It's really hard to describe, but it completely tears down and forces you to redefine what it is you think music is supposed to be, what a melody is supposed to be. I think it's important to be forced to look at these things, to question these things from time to time. And the problem is, I think much of our art that's been created by humans has gotten so sort of passe and blasé and whatever other French derived words you want to apply to it, that it's easy for AI to mathematically synthesize something similar. It would be very tough for AI to synthesize something that sounds like Thinking Fellers Union Local 282. It would be very difficult. Because first of all, nothing that they never played the same thing twice, so it's like they're all over the place. It does have a cohesion to it, and there are elements of it that I could describe, like such as dissonance, sometimes even a lack of discernible key in the song. I mean, just certain things like that you could describe as being an element of the style in which they made their music. But it would be very difficult to mathematically synthesize something that you could close your eyes and say that could easily be a Thinking Feller song. But I think that's what makes them real artists, and makes some of the stuff that that pop music has been putting out over the last 20 or 30 years complete garbage, because the art started life as artifice. It's there's nothing real about it. I listen to some of this bro country music, and that is some of the easiest stuff for AI to mimic, sort of, because there's such little sincerity in it from the beginning that it might as well be robotic. It tries so hard to be down with the common man that it exposes itself as complete artifice. So yeah, to me, that's why real musicians don't fear AI, because there is nothing that it can do to even come close to expressing a soul, because it has none. I think this is also the thing that a lot of us who sort of criticize the shredder mentality when it comes to guitar playing, this is what we struggle with in describing what it is that we really don't like or appreciate about that style. And I think it comes down to that it is complete artifice. There's no message in it. There's no expression of love or even hatred in it. Even the metal music that's really heavy, there's no true expression of anything really that I can discern a lot of the times. It's not an imperative to the artist that he must say this or must get this out. It's just, I'm doing this because I can, and because I've practiced a lot, and because I have to make an album this year. That's one of the things I could sort of respect about Tool, is they didn't rush out a whole bunch of albums. They could have, at the height of their career, they could have rushed out album after album and capitalized on the formula that they had created. But it took a long time. Plus, they had a lot going on, but it took a long time to sort of marinate in life, to get experience and to gather thoughts, to the point where you feel like you have to express something. But again, that's something that AI can do like that. You just tell it, hey, make me an album of music. There you go. There's your album of music. And it's cheap, and it's quick, and it's disposable. and there's no art to it. It is all artifice. It is the definition of artificial. So yeah, that'll do it. Tell me down below what you think about this. Are you afraid of AI? Have you ever used AI to create any kind of music? Have you attempted that? And what were the results? Let me know down below. I'd be really interested to hear all of your experimentations and the conclusions that you've reached.